Imagine standing outside on a quiet night, the air still and cool, the darkness stretching far beyond the reach of human sight. Above, the sky unfolds in its familiar, infinite expanse, scattered with stars that seem eternal, delicate pinpricks of light etched into the fabric of the cosmos. For as long as humans have looked up, there has been one companion above all others, a steady and unblinking partner in the night: the moon. Its phases guide the rhythms of our lives, from the steady breathing of the tides to the ancient calendars by which our ancestors counted the passage of time. We have taken its glow for granted, its silver light draped across oceans and forests, cities and deserts. It is so woven into the background of human existence that we scarcely think of it as optional. And yet, in the realm of imagination, we may allow ourselves a question that is both simple and profound. What if there had always been two moons? The mind resists this suggestion at first, for the singular moon feels so inevitable, so deeply anchored to our world. But the universe is not a place of inevitabilities. It is a place of chance, of collisions, of accidents that solidify into destinies. The earth itself is the child of such chaos, formed from dust and gas swirling around a newborn star. And our lone moon is believed to have been born of violence, a cataclysmic impact billions of years ago, when a Mars-sized body struck the early Earth and flung molten rock into orbit. Out of that incandescent wreckage, gravity sculpted the companion we now know, a single orb of stone bound to us forever. But it might not have been only one, there might have been two. To picture a world with two moons, we must first set aside the comfort of the familiar and step into the strangeness of possibility. We must imagine a sky altered in its symmetry, a sky that would never have looked quite the same from one night to the next. The presence of two moons would not be a mere doubling of beauty or brightness. It would be a transformation of everything. The tides would surge differently, the shadows cast at night would weave and twist, calendars and mythologies would follow paths unknown to us. In such a world, the story of Earth and life itself would be rewritten. Let us linger for a moment on the sky itself. For those of us born into a world of one moon, it is difficult to conceive how natural, how inevitable, that singular presence feels. Imagine instead a night where two moons hover side by side, not always equal, perhaps one larger and nearer, the other smaller and more distant, yet both distinct and undeniable. At times they might appear together, tracing arcs across the heavens in silent companionship. At other times one might rise as the other sets, trading watch over the sleeping world. Their phases would rarely align, so that one could be waxing crescent while the other is full, creating a shifting interplay of light that would change not just with the days, but with the hours. The nocturnal world, from the insects that hum to the humans who dream, would know no true darkness. Shadows would split into pairs, the silver outlines of trees and mountains, bending in double directions. Lovers would walk not under a single moonlit glow, but under a sky textured with complexity, a sky that never quite repeats itself. But to understand how such a world might come to be, we must return to the very beginning, to the early Earth, when all was molten and raw. The moon, as we know it, emerged from a single massive collision, but astrophysicists have long speculated that multiple moons may have formed from that same debris. For a time, Earth may indeed have had more than one natural satellite, a crowded dance of glowing spheres in orbit. The laws of gravity, merciless in their precision, would have caused them to merge, collide, or be flung into space until only one remained. Yet what if one of those siblings had endured? What if two moons had stabilized in long-term orbits, each finding a balance that allowed them to remain? It is not outside the realm of possibility. Other planets in our solar system boast multiple moons. Mars has two tiny ones. Jupiter and Saturn possess dozens. Only Earth, by cosmic chance, settled into companionship with a solitary partner. A two-moon Earth could have been just as natural an outcome. The mechanics of such an arrangement, though, are delicate. To exist stably, the two moons could not both occupy orbits too close to one another, for their mutual gravitational tugs would disrupt the balance. Instead, one might circle nearer, perhaps slightly smaller or larger than our current moon, while the other drifts farther out, a dimmer but constant sentinel. Their gravitational pulls would mingle, shaping tides not as a single steady rhythm, but as a layered, complex heartbeat of the ocean. Some nights their pulls would align, creating titanic tides that surged far inland. Other nights their influences would cancel, leaving coastlines strangely subdued. Life would have evolved in concert with this ever-shifting pulse, adapting to cycles more intricate than our simple lunar month. The dance of the seas, already a powerful force in shaping the forms of life, would have been amplified and diversified in ways that echo through all of evolution. To live under two moons would be to grow within a perpetual reminder of duality, of balance and tension. Early humans lifting their eyes to the sky would never have known the solitude of a single glowing orb. Instead, their myths, their songs, their stories would have been born of the interplay of two celestial beings. Perhaps they would have imagined them as siblings, one fierce and bright, the other subtle and watchful, or as lovers, forever circling in a slow, eternal pursuit. Calendars would have been more complex, with months divided into the weaving phases of both moons, overlapping like braided strands of time. Festivals might have been held not merely at the full moon, but at the rare moments when both were full together, flooding the night with an almost daytime brightness. Religion, art, poetry, all would have reflected the doubled sky, yet the influence would not stop at culture. The very climate of Earth might have been different. The combined gravitational effects of two moons would subtly alter the tilt of Earth's axis, the length of its days, the regularity of its seasons. Perhaps the additional tug would have stabilized the Earth even more than our single moon already does, making our climate calmer, our seasons more predictable. Or perhaps the interplay would have introduced new wobbles, subtle variations that shifted weather patterns across millennia. Either way, the two moons would not be passive ornaments, but active participants in the unfolding story of Earth. And through all of this, the sky itself would remain a source of wonder. Imagine the art of ancient civilizations painted not with one pale circle, but with two, their faces captured in stone carvings and woven into mythologies. Imagine the great poets of history writing not of a lone light, but of the endless dialogues of two. Imagine standing even now on a beach, the waves rushing in and out, and looking up to see not one moon, but two companions guiding the tides. The night would feel less solitary, more alive, as though the universe had given us not one beacon, but a pair of guardians. This is not just a thought experiment of astronomy, but of history, of life, of meaning. To ask what Earth would be like with two moons is to reflect on how deeply our world is shaped by forces we take for granted, and how different we ourselves might be under another sky. For now, we live with one moon. But for the length of this journey, let us imagine otherwise. Let us walk slowly, carefully into the world that might have been. To picture the mechanics of a two-moon Earth is to picture a delicate choreography written not in ink or paint, but in gravity itself. For all the elegance we might ascribe to the heavens, orbits are not static. They are alive, restless, continually shaped by the push and pull of masses bound together. The Earth and Moon, even as they appear serene in the night sky, are locked in a perpetual conversation. Gravity tugs, inertia resists, and out of this dialogue arises the balance we know today. But with two moons, that balance becomes layered and intricate, a harmony written for three voices instead of two. The first question one might ask is simple: where would the second moon go? For it to persist for billions of years, it must find a place where its orbit does not destabilize the system. The nearer moon, perhaps similar in size to our present one, would continue to circle in its familiar range, around 380,000 kilometers from Earth on average. The second would need to be farther out, maybe twice or three times that distance, so the two do not collide or interfere too drastically with each other. Its more distant orbit would make it appear smaller and dimmer in the sky, yet still unmistakably present. Some nights the outer moon might linger low, almost hesitant on the horizon, while the inner one races higher overhead. At other times, their arcs might cross in a visual duet, one bright, the other faint, but both shaping the night. With two moons, the Earth would feel a constant uneven tug. The nearer moon would raise tides as ours does now, swelling the oceans in a rhythm that life has long since embraced. The farther moon would add its own pull, weaker but steady, overlaid atop the first. The result would not be a simple doubling, but a complexity of cycles. Imagine the ocean as a vast breathing body. Today it inhales and exhales with the single breath of one moon, rising and falling in patterns we call tides. In a two-moon world, that body would breathe with two lungs, overlapping, sometimes aligned, sometimes in counterpoint. There would be nights of extraordinary tides, when the pulls of both moons aligned and waters surged further inland than we can easily imagine. Coastlines would reshape themselves again and again, as if sculpted by a hand that never stops moving. At other times, the forces would oppose one another, and the sea would lie oddly still, reluctant to rise or fall. The rhythm of water, which is the rhythm of life itself, would take on a richness and unpredictability far beyond our world. For the earliest forms of life crawling from the sea, this difference would be decisive. Tidal pools are thought to have been crucibles of complexity, little basins where waves left behind nutrients and organic molecules, where cycles of wet and dry helped spark the chemistry of life. In a two-moon Earth, those cycles would be multiplied. Pools would flood deeper, then linger longer, then dry more completely before flooding again. Each combination of lunar pulls would craft new conditions. The diversity of rhythms could have accelerated the diversity of life. Perhaps multicellular forms would have emerged sooner. Perhaps the strange dance of two moons would have woven more pathways for biology to follow, creating ecosystems that, in our single-moon world, never had a chance. And it is not only life in the ocean that would feel the moon's influence. The tilt of the Earth's axis, the very angle at which we face the sun, is stabilized by the gravitational embrace of the moon. Without it, our planet might wobble chaotically, its climate lurching from one extreme to another over geological time. With one moon, we have stability. With two, the possibilities widen. The second moon's tug could make the Earth even more steady, its seasons gentle and predictable across eons. Or it might introduce a subtle wobble of its own, weaving long cycles of change into the fabric of climate. Perhaps ice ages would come not merely from orbital variations around the sun, but from the interplay of lunar influences. Perhaps deserts would expand and retreat, not just with continental drift, but with rhythms written in the sky. Climate, so often at the mercy of chance, would become the child of an added layer of celestial influence. To imagine how this would shape the creatures of Earth is to imagine worlds within worlds. Birds migrating might learn to navigate not only by the single steady phase of one moon, but by the shifting dialogue of two. Predators that hunt at night would stalk under skies lit sometimes by twin lanterns, so bright that darkness is fractured, sometimes by mismatched crescents, their light asymmetrical and strange. Plants might evolve to sense these dual cycles, flowering not only in response to the sun, but in resonance with the patterns of moonlight. Every life form on Earth, in ways large and small, would be touched by the dual pull of two moons. And what of humans much later, finding their place in this alternate world? Before science, before mathematics, before telescopes, we would have felt the presence of two moons as a truth both obvious and mysterious. To grow up under their gaze would be to inherit a different sense of rhythm and meaning. Our ancestors, who built their first stories out of the patterns of the sky, would have traced not one glowing disk but two, assigning them names, personalities, destinies. One might be imagined as a guardian of fertility, the other as a keeper of war, or perhaps one as male, the other as female, their eternal circling seen as a cosmic marriage. Myths would arise to explain why one shines brighter, why one lingers while the other hastens across the heavens, why they sometimes oppose one another, why sometimes they seem to meet. Entire pantheons might be structured not around the sun and moon, but around sun, moon, and moon, a triad that framed existence itself. Calendars, too, would be remade. Our months, as we know them, trace the single lunar cycle of 29.5 days. But with two moons, calendars would be braided. One month would stretch with the nearer moon, another with the outer. Sometimes they would align, offering rare moments when both moons were full together, nights of awe that entire civilizations would celebrate. These rare double fulls might become holy days, occasions of great feasts or solemn rituals, the echoes of which would carry through millennia. Farmers would plant not only by the phase of one moon, but by the combined rhythm of two, seeking the luckiest moment when light and gravity together bless the soil. Even time itself, the way we divide days and seasons, would bend around the pattern of twin companions. Art, too, would transform. Imagine cave paintings that do not show a lone moon above a herd of animals, but two painted side by side, one larger, one smaller, both casting their glow. Imagine the architecture of temples, built not to frame a single rising, but to catch the moment when both moons rise together. Imagine the poetry of Sappho or the songs of Shakespeare, written not for one pale orb, but for a sky of shifting dualities, metaphors doubled, meanings enriched. The very language of longing, of mystery, of beauty, would be reshaped under such a sky. Yet beneath all this wonder lies a question both practical and profound. How long could such a system last? Gravity is not patient. It is not content to leave things as they are. Over time, orbits evolve. Our own moon is slowly drifting away from Earth, retreating by a few centimeters each year. A second moon would do the same, its distance changing, its influence shifting. Over millions of years, the balance might be altered. The two moons could drift into resonances, repeating patterns of tug and release that amplify their effects. They could even collide, merging into a single larger moon once more. The skies we imagine could themselves be temporary, the beauty of two moons destined eventually to collapse back into one. And yet, for as long as they remained, they would shape a world profoundly different from ours. So we linger on the thought. Imagine standing at the edge of the ocean on such a world, your feet sunk into wet sand as waves rush forward and retreat. Above you, the nearer moon looms bright and round, while higher still, the outer moon glows faintly, its light stretched thin across the sky. The water at your feet surges not with one rhythm but with two, a syncopated dance, as though the sea itself cannot decide which master to follow. You feel the pull of both, though you cannot name it, a subtle sense of living in a world larger, stranger, more layered than you can easily grasp. This is the world that might have been, the earth that almost was. When the first humans lifted their eyes to the heavens, they saw a sky that was both infinite and intimate. The stars burned far away beyond the reach of imagination, but the moon, our moon, was close enough to feel like kin, close enough to follow its changing face night after night. It was the lamp of the night, the silver coin above the horizon, the reliable marker that no storm or season could erase. In our world, this singular light became the earliest clock, the first storyteller in the dark. But in a world of two moons, that primal relationship would have been more complex, more layered. Humanity's earliest myths would have been born not of solitude but of duality. Picture a small band of hunter-gatherers, tens of thousands of years ago, clustered around a fire in the vast darkness of a prehistoric night. Overhead, two moons hover. One is brighter, nearer, commanding attention with its stark light. The other, smaller, fainter, rides higher, softer but still undeniable. The children stare at them, their faces lit not only by the fire, but by the double glow of the heavens. Their parents, already attuned to patterns in nature, tell stories to make sense of the sight. Perhaps they say the two moons are sisters, one bold, one shy. Or perhaps they are rivals, forever circling, forever apart. To gaze upon two moons is to feel a tension, a narrative begging to be told, and so myth is born. As humans spread and cultures deepened, these twin moons would become the cornerstone of meaning. In Mesopotamia, where scribes etched the heavens into clay tablets, they would not have drawn a single crescent as the symbol of divinity, but a pair, entwined, embodying two complementary deities. In Egypt, temples might have been aligned not only with the rising sun, but with the rare nights when both moons appeared full together, flooding the desert with a ghostly brilliance that turned sand into silver. Imagine priests and priestesses standing in that unnatural brightness, interpreting it as the veil between worlds, the night when gods walked among mortals. Festivals would have been timed not simply to harvests or solstices, but to those luminous conjunctions, nights when the heavens blazed with doubled power. The Greeks, who wove entire cosmologies from the sky, might have seen in two moons the embodiment of duality itself, light and shadow, reason and passion, order and chaos. Philosophers would have debated their meaning. Were they co-eternal, born together, or was one elder, one younger? Did they represent harmony or the inevitability of conflict? Poets would have sung not of the moon's singular light reflected in the sea, but of the shifting dialogue of two, metaphors doubled, symbols richer. Where we read of Artemis or Selene as a lone lunar goddess, they might have envisioned twin sisters, each governing different aspects of life, one presiding over fertility and childbirth, the other over war and destiny, their phases marking the balance of the human soul. In India, the lunar calendar guides rituals and festivals. With two moons, the structure of sacred time would have been vastly more intricate. Instead of one waxing and waning cycle, there would be two weaving in and out of alignment, creating sacred nights of rare coincidence. A full moon from one aligned with a new moon from the other might have symbolized cosmic tension, the universe holding its breath. And when both shone full, entire civilizations might have stopped in awe, perceiving it as a cosmic blessing or warning. Pilgrimages would have been undertaken to temples positioned where both moons could be seen rising together on the horizon, a sight that would have burned itself into collective memory. Calendars themselves would be braided with complexity. Our months, derived from the single lunar cycle, follow a simple rhythm, waxing, full, waning, new. With two moons, time would feel like a dance of interlocking wheels. One month would trace the nearer moon, another the farther. Sometimes their cycles would mesh, sometimes they would drift apart, creating long periods where nights never repeated in the same way. A farmer planning when to sow seeds would consult not only the sun seasons, but the alignment of both moons. Entire systems of astrology would evolve, not from the paths of planets alone, but from the dual rhythm of two satellites, each casting its influence over human fate. Horoscopes might declare one's destiny not by the stars, but by which moon ruled the sky at one eos birth. Were you born under the nearer moon sed's full glow, or under the subtler light of the distant one? Such questions would shape identity, belief, and culture. The artistry of civilizations would also reflect the doubled heavens. In caves at Lascaux, where we see paintings of bulls and stags under a single disk, there would instead be two glowing forms above. Stonehenge and other megalithic structures which in our world align with solstices and lunar risings, would be far more complex. Imagine circles of stones designed to frame the conjunctions of both moons, to mark those rare nights when they rose or set in tandem. Priests and astronomers would gather in those moments, their chants echoing under skies so bright they banished the stars. Entire architectures of meaning would arise from these conjunctions, with temples built to honor not only the sun and earth, but the pair of companions that ruled the night. And then there is art in its more intimate forms. Picture the pottery of Greece, not painted with a single crescent hanging above lovers or warriors, but with two, their phases adding layers of symbolism. Imagine Japanese haiku, not dwelling on the transient beauty of a single moon mirrored in a pond, but meditating on the contrast between two reflections, one perfect, one distorted, one bright, one faint. Chinese poetry, already filled with lunar imagery, would double its metaphors, pairing moons as lovers separated across the heavens or as rulers balancing heaven and earth. In the Americas, carvings of jaguars and eagles beneath the twin moons would have adorned temples, signaling power drawn not from one celestial guide, but from two. The very psychology of humanity might be altered. To live under a sky with one moon is to have a single steady symbol of constancy, an anchor in the night. To live under two is to inherit an awareness of duality, of choice, of tension between forces. Perhaps philosophies of balance, of yin and yang, of opposing but complementary truths, would arise earlier and more universally. The dual moons would teach night after night that no force exists alone, that every light has a partner, that time itself is woven from interplay. Children would grow up pointing to the sky, not asking, "What is the moon?" but "Why are there two?" That question would ripple through religions, sciences, and philosophies, shaping the course of civilization. Even the language of love and longing would transform. Where we write of moonlight as a singular, gentle glow, in that world poems would speak of double shadows, of lovers bathed in one light while dreaming of the other. Where we describe loneliness under a single moon, they would speak of companionship, of the sky itself reminding them that no one walks alone. And where we speak of madness as lunacy, born of one moon's pull, they might speak of dual madness, the mind split between two influences, two tides of the soul. The night sky would not merely be observed, it would be lived. Every culture, every myth, every story told around every fire would carry the imprint of two moons. To imagine this alternate Earth is not only to imagine different tides and climates, but different hearts, different meanings, different ways of being human. The world beneath two moons would not be our world at all, but another Earth entirely, one whose story, from the first breath of life to the latest poet's sigh, would unfold under doubled light. As centuries passed and civilizations rose and fell, the presence of two moons in the sky would remain the one unchanging truth above the shifting tides of human history. Empires would collapse, borders would move, languages would die and be born again. But the dual companions of night would endure, silent witnesses to it all. For millennia, humanity would know them only through story, ritual, and myth. Yet with the advent of reason, with the slow awakening of science, those two moons would become more than symbols. They would become puzzles to solve, mysteries to measure, stepping stones in the long journey of understanding the universe. In our world, the scientific revolution found its spark in careful observation of the heavens. Tycho Brahe, Johannes Kepler, Galileo Galilei. These figures gazed upward and saw patterns hidden in the motions of stars and planets. With two moons in the sky, that spark might have come earlier, or perhaps with even greater intensity. The nightly dance of two orbs, sometimes aligned, sometimes opposed, would beg for explanation. Priests and scholars would not be content to describe them as gods alone. They would track their movements, chart their cycles, and attempt to predict the interplay. Astrology, which in our world intertwined with astronomy for centuries, would be doubly enriched and doubly challenged. Predictions based on a single lunar rhythm would falter in the face of two, pushing thinkers to refine their models to distinguish between superstition and observation. The sky would force precision, and precision would birth science. Imagine Galileo lifting his telescope, that fragile cylinder of glass and metal, and turning it not toward one moon, but two. Through the lenses, he would see craters and mountains mirrored across both bodies, surfaces scarred by ancient impacts. He would realize that both were worlds in their own right, not perfect spheres of divine light, but stones circling the earth. His revelations would multiply, his courage redouble, for the heavens themselves would scream their imperfection. The Church's resistance to such discoveries might have been even fiercer, for two moons meant two centers of myth unseated, two divine symbols revealed as mere rock. Yet the truth, once seen, could not be unseen. The Renaissance, already a rebirth of vision, would be reborn again under a doubled sky. Navigation, too, would take new forms. In our world, sailors guided themselves by stars and by the moon's position above the horizon. With two moons, navigation would be enriched, the heavens providing not one beacon but two, shifting in a predictable pattern. Charts and maps would be more intricate, mariners relying on the relative positions of both moons to fix their course. The age of exploration might have unfolded more swiftly, for the doubled sky offered more reliable guides across the endless oceans. And with exploration would come encounter, trade, and conflict, all subtly accelerated by the gifts of the heavens. As modern science matured, the two moons would become laboratories for thought. Newton, formulating his laws of motion and gravity, would find confirmation not only in the fall of an apple or the orbit of planets, but in the delicate dance of Earth and its two companions. The visible tug-of-war between the moons, the layered cycles of their orbits, would provide endless examples of celestial mechanics. Students of physics would learn not only from the arc of a cannonball, but from the shifting rhythm of tides written on their own coastlines. The very mathematics of gravitation might have evolved differently, enriched by the complexity of a system, with three major bodies in constant interplay. Newton's Principia, already a masterpiece of human thought, would have been even more monumental, weaving equations that accounted for two satellites tugging at their parent world. And what of the tides themselves, those ceaseless breaths of the ocean? With two moons, coastal civilizations would become intimately attuned to the layered rhythms of the sea. Fishermen would learn not only the pattern of a spring tide and a neap tide, but of double surges, double calms. Ports would rise and fall with extraordinary variance, shaping commerce, shipbuilding, and even warfare. Great naval battles might be won or lost not by wind alone, but by the peculiar alignment of moons that swelled or stilled the seas. Coastal engineering, too, would evolve more swiftly, as humanity learned to harness or defend against tides of greater power and unpredictability. Canals, dikes, and harbors would be designed with an eye not just to one cycle, but to many. The mastery of water would be inseparable from the mastery of the moons. The Industrial Revolution, when it arrived, would cast its gaze upward as well as outward. Telescopes would be turned not only to distant planets, but to the twin companions always present, always familiar. Astronomers would debate their origins. Were they born together from the same great collision, or was one captured later, a wanderer held in Earth's embrace? Questions of geology would not be confined to Earth's crust, but extended to these visible neighbors, their craters and valleys demanding explanation. The very concept of planetary science might arise earlier, accelerated by the realization that our planet is not alone in its history, but part of a triad, a system of three bodies entwined since time immemorial. By the 20th century, With rockets piercing the atmosphere and satellites orbiting the globe, the two moons would become destinations. The space race, that great contest of Cold War pride and ingenuity, would not have one target but two. The first human footprints might have been planted not only on one lunar surface, but on both, each offering its own mysteries, its own terrain. Imagine the drama of history unfolding, one superpower landing on the nearer moon, the other rushing to claim the farther. Flags would be planted on twin soils, symbolic victories doubled, rivalries inflamed. Humanity's first steps beyond Earth would be richer, more ambitious, driven not by a single goal, but by two beckoning worlds. The science learned from those journeys would transform us. Seismographs placed on both moons would reveal their interiors, their differences, their echoes of Earth's own violent past. Samples returned would provide not one record of early solar system history, but two, complementary, contrasting, telling a fuller story of how planets and moons are made. Our understanding of impacts, volcanism, and orbital dynamics would deepen, grounded in evidence from two natural laboratories instead of one. Space exploration itself might expand more quickly, for with two stepping stones beyond Earth, the dream of reaching further, to Mars, to the outer planets, would feel closer, more inevitable. Culturally, too, the modern age would bear the imprint of a doubled sky. Literature, cinema, music, these arts, shaped so deeply by imagery of the moon, would resonate differently. Imagine Beethoven composing not his Moonlight Sonata, but a work inspired by two moons intertwining melodies, a duet between light and shadow. Imagine filmmakers framing lovers not against a single glowing orb, but against a sky adorned with two, their symbolism multiplied, their metaphors richer. Science fiction, that great mirror of human longing, would paint stories not of lonely astronauts gazing back at one pale disk, but of explorers looking homeward to see two, a doubled reminder of where they came from. The collective imagination would be altered, its metaphors deeper, its dreams more expansive. And through it all, ordinary life would continue beneath the gaze of two moons. Children would still look upward in wonder, but their questions would be different. Why are they different sizes? Why do their phases not align? Which one is older? Their curiosity would feed the future of science, generation after generation. Farmers would still sow and reap, but their almanacs would be filled with charts of dual cycles, predicting which moon would rule the night. Lovers would still walk hand in hand beneath moonlight, but they would feel the companionship of two guardians instead of one. The sky would never be singular, never lonely. It would always remind us of plurality, of balance, of the infinite possibilities of worlds that might have been. In this imagined modernity, Earth with two moons becomes not only a stage for science, but a canvas for meaning. It is a world where human ambition, human creativity, and human longing are forever shaped by the presence of dual companions. The moons are not only rocks in the sky, they are mirrors of ourselves, teaching us that even the most familiar truths can be doubled, complicated, enriched. To live in such a world would be to grow up knowing that reality is never singular, that the universe is always more layered, more mysterious than it first appears. The future of a two-moon Earth is written not only in human ambition, but in the relentless mathematics of gravity. The heavens are not static, they are in motion, evolving with every passing moment. The moon we know today is slowly leaving us, inch by inch, drifting away as the energy of Earth's rotation transfers into its orbit. In the deep future, it will stand farther from us, smaller in the sky, its grip on our tides diminished. With two moons, this slow drift would be doubled, their paths influenced not only by Earth's pull, but by each other's restless tug. To imagine the fate of such a system is to imagine a cosmic story unfolding over billions of years, a story with chapters of harmony, of chaos, and of transformation. At first, the two moons might settle into a rhythm, their orbits stable enough to endure for eons. One, closer, brighter, would dominate the night sky much as our present moon does. The other, farther, dimmer, would circle more slowly, its phases stretching longer, its glow softer. Together they would shape the tides, the climate, and the imagination of humanity. But their partnership would not be eternal. Slowly, inexorably, they would influence each other's motion. Resonances would form, moments when the ratio of their orbital periods fell into simple fractions, amplifying their gravitational interactions. These resonances could last for millions of years, creating patterns that repeated like music. But resonance, though beautiful, is not always kind. It can destabilize orbits, pushing one moon closer, flinging the other farther, until the balance is broken. What might happen then? One possibility is that the outer moon would drift farther and farther, until Earth, yes, hold on, it weakens. A passing nudge from the sun or the other planets could one day liberate it completely, casting it adrift into the solar system as a solitary wanderer. For billions of years, humanity might have lived under two moons, only to watch one slowly fade, shrinking each night until it vanished into the void. Imagine the cultural impact of such a disappearance. For generations, poets and priests would lament the loss of a celestial sibling. Entire mythologies might be rewritten, new religions born to explain why one guardian abandoned its watch. The sky would feel emptier, lonelier, as though the universe itself had turned a page. Another possibility is less gentle. The two moons, their orbits destabilized by long-term gravitational interplay, might one day draw too near. Slowly at first, imperceptibly, their paths could converge until, after millions of years, the inevitable occurs. They collide. Such an event would be a cataclysm beyond human scale, a slow-motion apocalypse played out in the heavens. From Earth, it would appear as a night of fire, two glowing orbs spiraling closer, until in one unimaginable instant they crash together. Debris would explode outward, painting the sky with streaks of molten rock, forming a glowing halo of dust and fragments. Over time, gravity would gather this wreckage into a single new moon, larger than either predecessor, scarred with the memory of collision. For humanity, if it still existed then, the night sky would be transformed forever, the dual guardians replaced by one swollen successor. Myths of union and destruction would abound, the heavens themselves teaching of creation through violence. But perhaps the most enduring possibility is that the two moons would remain, shifting but never fully destabilized, companions for as long as Earth endures. In that case, the future becomes a story not of loss, but of opportunity. Humanity, reaching outward into the solar system, would find in two moons a double gift. Colonization would begin not with one frontier, but two. The nearer moon, larger in the sky, would be the first step, its surface dotted with bases and domes, cities carved into craters, observatories peering into the depths of space. The farther moon, more remote, would follow, its position making it an ideal outpost for launching missions into the outer planets. Two laboratories, two homelands beyond Earth, two worlds to shape in our image. The human story would be enriched, our ambitions multiplied by the heavens themselves. These moons would become more than homes. They would become engines of civilization. Their resources, metals buried in their crusts, water locked in their shadows, would feed industries and sustain colonies. Their orbits would serve as harbors for vast stations and shipyards, the twin anchors of a civilization no longer bound to Earth alone. Their skies, free of atmosphere, would host telescopes peering deeper than any earthbound lens, mapping galaxies, searching for life. Two moons would mean two vantage points, two bases of operation, two mirrors of human ingenuity cast into the void. Space itself would feel closer, more accessible, for humanity would have not one but two stepping stones between Earth and the stars. And yet, even as humanity thrives, the moons themselves would continue their slow drift. Over billions of years, they would move farther away, their presence in the sky diminished. The tides, once powerful, would weaken. The days of Earth would lengthen as its rotation slows. The rhythm of the planet would change, subtly but inevitably. One day, far in the future, the Earth and its moons might reach a balance, locked in a tidal embrace, where Earth always shows the same face to both companions. The night sky then would be frozen, the moons motionless, eternal ornaments hung in place. For any beings alive then, the heavens would no longer tell of change, but of permanence, the endless gaze of two watchers unmoving in the night. Beyond even that lies the far future, when the sun itself will swell into a red giant, consuming Mercury, Venus, and perhaps Earth. If our planet survives, it will be scorched, its oceans boiled away, its atmosphere stripped. The moons, faithful companions for billions of years, will orbit a dying world. Perhaps they too will be torn apart by the sun's growing tides, their fragments scattering into rings of dust. Or perhaps they will remain, circling a charred remnant of Earth, until the sun collapses into a white dwarf, the system frozen in silence. The story of two moons would then be part of a greater story, the story of stars and planets, of beginnings and endings on a cosmic scale. And still, even in such an ending, there is beauty. For in imagining two moons, we are reminded that the universe is vast in possibility, that our world, so familiar, could have been otherwise, that the stories we tell, the lives we live, the civilizations we build, are shaped not only by the land beneath our feet, but by the sky above our heads. Two moons would have changed everything: the tides, the seasons, the myths, the sciences, the future. To live under their gaze would be to live in a world perpetually aware of balance, of duality, of companionship. A world that teaches every night that nothing is ever singular, that every light has a partner, that the universe itself is woven from relationships. And so, as we return to our own world with its single familiar moon, we might look upward with new eyes. We might see not only what is, but what might have been. We might feel in the glow of that solitary orb the ghost of another, a silent companion that never was. And in that imagining we glimpse the truth of existence, that the universe is not inevitable, that our world is but one of many possible worlds, and that even the sky itself could have told another story. What if Earth had two moons? The answer is not only in physics, not only in tides and orbits, but in the hearts of those who dream. It is in the stories we tell, the meaning we find, the beauty we see in the night. Two moons are one, the universe is a place of endless wonder, and we are its witnesses, its storytellers, its children. In the end, to imagine Earth with two moons is to imagine ourselves differently. For the night sky is more than an empty stage of stars. It is a mirror, a canvas upon which humanity has painted its fears, its longings, its questions about the infinite. To live beneath two moons would be to live beneath a doubled reflection of ourselves, two silver faces turning across the heavens, two reminders that the cosmos is layered and complex, that no single story is ever enough. Consider the nights of ancient shepherds and wanderers. With one moon they traced the months, the tides, the cycles of birth and harvest. With two, those rhythms would be richer, stranger, perhaps more difficult to predict, but also more alive. The sky would feel like an active participant in daily life, a shifting dance of light and shadow, of twin guides who rarely moved in unison. One might rise while the other set, one might wax while the other waned, their dialogue an endless improvisation. For early humans, that dialogue might have seemed divine, a conversation of gods playing out above the world, their moods reflected in the restless oceans and the pull of seasons. Civilizations would have carried these impressions forward, shaping temples, stories, and calendars around the duet in the sky. The pyramids of Giza, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the stone circles of Europe, all might have been aligned not just to stars and solstices, but to the precise interplay of two lunar cycles. Priests might have read omens not from eclipses alone, but from moments when the moons crossed paths, one dimming the other in a soft embrace of shadow. Festivals would not simply celebrate the full moon, but the rare occasions when both were full together, flooding the world with doubled silver light, so bright it turned night into day. Art and myth would be marked by duality, by twinning, by the eternal lesson that beauty is magnified when it is shared. And as humanity matured, as it learned to look upward with instruments rather than prayers, the two moons would continue to inspire. Astronomers would chart their paths with painstaking care. Mathematicians would unravel their orbits with new branches of geometry, and philosophers would marvel at the elegance of a cosmos where complexity was not chaos but harmony. Science itself might have advanced sooner, driven by the need to understand a sky that refused to be simple. The two moons would remind every observer that nature is not a single line, but a web, not a solitary voice, but a chorus. Today, with our telescopes and satellites, we might look at them not only as celestial objects, but as neighbors, as future homes, as destinations that beckon us outward. A child gazing up might not dream of being the first to stand on the moon, but the first to walk between two, to bridge the gap with a spacecraft, to see Earth framed by twin guardians in the sky. Science fiction, born beneath such a sky, would imagine civilizations stretched across not one barren world but two, entire epics of exploration and settlement written into the heavens themselves. The very scale of human ambition might be larger, more daring, shaped by a sky that constantly offered more than one path forward. And yet, for all the science, for all the colonization and technology, there would remain something quieter, something that belongs not to equations, but to feelings. Imagine standing on a calm shore, watching the two moons rise together, their light shimmering across the water in twin ribbons. Imagine sitting beneath them in silence, knowing that your ancestors thousands of years ago did the same, that your descendants thousands of years hence will still do the same. That continuity, that companionship would shape how we see ourselves in time, not as solitary beings in a fleeting present, but as part of a chain that stretches backward and forward, lit by two gentle lanterns in the dark. Even the smallest moments would feel touched by them. Lovers walking beneath their glow would speak of fate doubled, of promises witnessed by two eternal eyes. Writers would fill libraries with metaphors drawn from their phases, comparing lives and choices to the waxing of one, the waning of another. Musicians would compose symphonies inspired by the rhythm of their interplay, notes rising and falling like crescents and shadows. Entire languages might evolve with words dedicated to the subtleties of their appearances, terms for the nights when they cross, when they align, when one disappears behind the other. The human imagination would be stretched not just outward to the stars, but sideways, to the richness of relationships, to the poetry of two-ness. And still, beneath the beauty, the science would quietly endure. The moons would continue their slow migration outward, their faces changing in the sky. The tides they shape would continue to sculpt the coasts, to nourish ecosystems, to influence the climate. Their presence would remain a reminder that life itself is tethered to the heavens, that without celestial companions, the earth would be a different place entirely. Two moons or one, we exist in dialogue with the sky, our oceans and atmospheres dancing to its rhythm. The final thought is perhaps the simplest. When we imagine Earth with two moons, we are not just imagining astronomy or physics or even history. We are imagining an alternate version of ourselves. For the sky we inherit shapes who we become. With two moons, we might have been more attuned to patterns, more sensitive to duality, more accepting of contradiction. We might have grown into a civilization that sees not opposites, but complements, not singular truths, but paired realities. Perhaps in some small way the two moons might have taught us to be wiser, and so, as we return to our own world, beneath the solitary companion that has watched over us since the beginning, we might look upward differently. We might see in that lone orb not only what is, but what could have been, a reminder that the universe is vast with possibility, that every world is a unique combination of chance and circumstance. We might let the moon's glow remind us of fragility, of wonder, of the beauty of what is given and the strangeness of what is imagined. The documentary closes as it began, with the slow turning of the earth beneath the heavens. The stars wheel silently, the oceans breathe in and out, and the moon hangs above, single and serene. But in our minds there is now another. A phantom companion, a twin that never was, a light that haunts the imagination. We carry it with us, this vision of a two-moon Earth, not as a loss but as a gift, a story that reminds us how thin the line is between what is and what might have been, how vast the universe is in its capacity for wonder, and how even the smallest change in the sky could have rewritten the story of life below. And so the question lingers, softly, like a whisper beneath the stars. What if Earth had two moons? As we drift toward the close of this thought experiment, the sky above us feels heavier with meaning. We have traced the journey of two moons from their imagined birth in fire, through the slow unfolding of their orbits, across the restless tides they stir, into the hearts of civilizations that would have grown beneath them. We have followed them across ages of myth, into the era of science, through the hands of explorers and dreamers who might have reached out to touch their surfaces, and yet the story is not finished. For no matter how deeply we explore the mechanics and the consequences, there is always a final layer, a quieter one, that belongs not to physics, but to perspective. The truth is that the question, what if Earth had two moons, is less about alternate astronomy than it is about alternate humanity. We have, in our world, evolved beneath a single guiding light. Its rhythm has paced our calendars, its glow has shaped our myths, its pull has sculpted our oceans. Had we looked up and seen two moons instead of one, our reflections of ourselves would have been doubled, refracted, reimagined. The sky would never have felt solitary. It would have always spoken in pairs, teaching us to think not in singular lines of destiny, but in parallel paths. Imagine for a moment that you are standing at the edge of a prehistoric fire. The air smells of smoke and pine. The first humans sit close together, whispering stories as their shadows flicker across the rocks. Overhead, two moons rise side by side. Gasps ripple through the group, not fear but awe. In that silence, the first seeds of myth are planted, the first metaphors of duality take root. Two lights above, two reflections in a pool of water, two halves of a broken shell. From that moment forward, human imagination walks in step with the heavens, and now, thousands of generations later, the same scene unfolds in another form. Not hunters, but astronomers, not fires, but telescopes, not myths, but models and simulations. Still, the feeling is the same, the sense of wonder at a universe that could have been otherwise, for in truth, every law of physics that gave us one moon could just as easily have given us two. The alternate Earth lies only a hair's breadth away in possibility, a ghostly sibling world just beyond reach. It is here, in this lingering thought, that we transition from speculation to meditation. For when the lights in the sky change, we change, and to wonder about two moons is to wonder about ourselves. The story of two moons does not end with orbital mechanics or with the mathematics of their slow retreat into space. Those are important, yes, but they are only part of the narrative. For what matters most in the long arc of time is not simply how the heavens move, but how those movements echo within us. each age of humanity would have found a different meaning in their doubled presence. In the ancient world, they might have been woven into myth as twin gods, siblings forever circling the earth. In the classical age, philosophers might have debated whether they represented balance or rivalry, harmony or conflict, and in the scientific era, they would become both puzzle and promise, objects to measure, to visit, to colonize. Yet beyond all these interpretations, there is a quieter continuity, the fact that they would have been with us every night, faithful companions, shaping not just tides and climates, but imaginations and dreams. Think of how differently our sense of solitude might have felt. A lone moon speaks of singularity, of isolation, of the fragile uniqueness of Earth in the cosmic ocean. Two moons, by contrast, whisper of relationship, of dialogue, of connection. The sky itself would have seemed less lonely, more like a conversation between celestial bodies, and in their mirrored glow we might have seen our own yearning for companionship reflected. Perhaps that subtle influence would have nudged our cultures, our art, even our philosophies toward greater recognition of the power of two-ness, of pairs, of partnerships, of balance. And yet, for all the richness such a sky would provide, we must also admit its challenges. Two moons would complicate navigation, agriculture, and timekeeping. Farmers would struggle to match their crops to shifting cycles. Sailors would need new tables for tides that moved in unfamiliar rhythms. Astronomers would work through centuries of trial and error before unraveling the mathematics of dual orbits. The very act of measuring time might have unfolded differently, with calendars more intricate, festivals less predictable, and entire systems of belief shaped by the difficulty of harmonizing two shifting cycles. In such complexity, humanity might have learned patience, resilience, and humility before the heavens. As centuries turned to millennia, the two moons would remain steadfast, though never still. Their faces would change with erosion and impacts, their orbits would drift ever outward. Now and then, their gravitational tug might jolt Earth's climate in subtle ways, producing seasons of chaos followed by long periods of calm. Civilizations might rise and fall in rhythm with these cosmic nudges, though never knowing fully that the sky above played a hand in their fate. In this way, the moons would not only be silent witnesses to history, but quiet participants in it, partners in the unfolding story of life below. By the time humanity grew advanced enough to leave Earth, the two moons would no longer be mysteries, but destinations. Spacecraft would thread between them, astronauts would plant flags on both, engineers would dream of habitats carved into their craters. Looking back toward Earth, they would see a sight no one in our reality will ever witness, a planet rising above two horizons, framed by two guardians. Such an image would become a new icon of identity, a reminder not just of where we come from, but of how extraordinary our version of the cosmos truly is. It is at this point, standing on the edge of imagination and reality, that the story folds back upon itself. For the question of two moons is ultimately not about orbital stability, nor even about cultural history. It is about us, about how profoundly the sky shapes the stories we tell, the choices we make, the lives we live. A doubled moon would have doubled our metaphors, our myths, our mathematics, our sense of what is possible. And by wondering what might have been, we become more aware of what is. And still there is something deeply human about imagining what might have been. We cannot help ourselves. We look up at the heavens and project stories onto them, filling the silence of the night with meaning. Two moons would have given us more material for this ancient habit of myth-making, more symbols to carry into our art and philosophy. The very notion of duality might have been etched more deeply into our consciousness. One moon waxing while the other waned could have become a natural metaphor for balance in opposition. Life and death, joy and sorrow, growth and decline. Their constant interplay would have been a nightly reminder that nothing exists alone, that every force is answered by another. In times of war, perhaps the moons would have been seen as rivals, locked in eternal competition, each vying for dominance in the sky. In times of peace, they might have been read as companions, two luminous beings sharing their journey around Earth, partners in a cosmic dance. Their meanings would shift with history, reflecting the moods of the civilizations beneath them, yet always returning to the central theme of two-ness, of relationship. Even science would not be immune to this symbolic richness. Theories of nature might have leaned more heavily on the idea of dual systems, of forces in balance, of equilibrium born not from simplicity but from interaction. Just as the moons circled each other and the Earth in a delicate choreography, so too might early scientists have sought patterns of harmony in complexity, encouraging intellectual traditions that valued interdependence rather than isolation. The Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, perhaps these eras would have emerged with slightly different philosophies, colored by the persistent presence of two celestial guides, and consider the emotional weight of their nightly presence. A lone traveler crossing a desert, or a sailor adrift on the open sea, might find comfort not in a single beacon, but in two. The night would feel less lonely, the sky less indifferent. Where in our world the moon sometimes embodies solitude, in theirs it might embody companionship. A sky with two moons could have encouraged humanity to imagine itself not as a solitary species in a vast, cold universe, but as part of a greater network of relationships, both earthly and cosmic. Even art would take on new dimensions. Painters might depict landscapes bathed in twin shadows. Poets might write verses about the layered silences between two rising lights. Architecture could be inspired by the geometry of dual orbits, with arches and domes echoing the curves of their paths. Music might carry rhythms that mimic the interplay of cycles, one melody waxing as the other wanes, harmonies built not from a single theme, but from counterpoint. Entire genres of creativity would flourish under skies that offered not one muse, but two. And yet, despite the complexity, despite the richness of their presence, the moons would also serve as reminders of fragility. For their orbits, though long-lived, would not be eternal. Slowly, imperceptibly, they would drift farther away, their faces shrinking in the sky, their pull upon the tides weakening. Humanity might live its entire history unaware of this gradual retreat, only to discover it in the age of telescopes and precise instruments. That discovery would carry a bittersweet truth. Even the companions we thought eternal are subject to change, to loss, to time. Such knowledge might deepen our sense of impermanence, of the preciousness of the moment we are given. In the end, to wonder about two moons is to wonder about how differently we might have lived, how the same species with the same planet and the same potential could have walked another path under another sky. It is not a question of astronomy alone, but of identity, of imagination, of the fragile interplay between the cosmos above and the consciousness below.